Yes, so thank you very much. I'm very excited to see that we have quite a few people on the line today for what I think is going to be an exciting learning lab. I also want to do a special call out to my colleagues who are involved with the What Works to Prevent Violence Against Women initiative. Many of them have also called in to hear about some of the work that we've been doing under Strive. What Works is also a DFID-funded consortium that works on preventing violence against women. So we have many things in common. Today we're going to learn a little bit of the use of Photovoice as a mechanism for especially researching sensitive issues and engaging participants in the research process. I'm excited to introduce to you Dr. Jerry Mashana, who's been working with us for the last, I guess it's almost 6 years now as part of Strive. He's based in Mwanza, Tanzania, and has been working there as an anthropologist for almost 20 years, I think. And he's going to be telling us today about 2 different uses of this technique that they've been experimenting with. So one is in the conduct of a study we're doing on alcohol use among adolescents, and the other is using cameras with participants in a study of partner violence in Mwanza City. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Jerry, and let you take us through.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lori, for that kind introduction, and thanks, Annie, for organizing the Learning Lab. So today I'm going to present, as Lori has said, on a Photovoice, a method that is one of the methods in participatory research, and really sharing our experiences from Mwanza on how we've used this method in 2 different studies, one focusing on young people and alcohol, and another one focusing on violence, intimate partner violence, and women. So this is the outline of my talk today. So in the first part, I'm going to talk about why do we use photo voices, and also talk a little bit about its historical development and use. And then I'll also highlight some of the challenges that are associated with the method, broadly speaking. And then I'm going now to the next phases. I'm going to talk about these 2 studies. So I'll start first with the study on alcohol use among young people in Tanzania, and then I'll talk about the second study, which is intimate partner violence trial, which is known as Maisha trial. And then in the last part, I'm going to summarize some of the lessons that we've learned from using these 2 methods in these 2 studies, and make some recommendations for people who are considering to use this method in similar settings, or sort of a developing country context. So why Photovoice? And really, this method, the use of photos or images in research has a long history. But then, in terms of the Photovoice, other method we know today was really developed and refined in the 90s by Wang Boris and his colleagues. So through their work in several publications, they really described how they used the method and some of the important things that it contributed in research. And for them, they present 3 goals for the method. So the first goal is to enable people to record and reflect their community's strengths and concerns. Secondly, to promote a critical dialogue and knowledge about personal and community issues through discussion of the photo. So really, as a tool, it enables, all these images as tools. They enable now the communities to reflect and to discuss together with the researchers about the issues or under investigation or under research. And the third goal is to reach the policymakers. So Photovoices really expand this arena or this space for participatory research. There has been previously, as probably some of you know, that there has been a lot of discussion about how to make communities more engaged or participate in the research process broadly, and in some instances people being quite critical of researchers, the way they've really used the communities just as an object of study. So the method offers another option for addressing that, so widening the participatory field, but also addressing issues of power imbalances. And giving some power, or some people say empowering the communities to participate in all stages of the research process. So really, in use, Photovoices have, especially recently, communities or participants have mostly been engaged perhaps in data collection, interpretation, and dissemination. But then some people think also it's important, even in the agenda setting or at the first stage where people are talking about identifying research issues, it's important to involve them. So this method really has been quite useful in that manner. And then broadly, the discourse about the democratization of the research process. So ideas like, okay, we need the participation of those who are involved, and all of us agree that the community members or the communities are quite important stakeholders, and they offer additional insights into the community perspectives. So when used in combination with other methods, really enable us to have a glimpse of actually what is happening in the communities, but then from the perspective of the community members themselves, what is happening, and then their interpretation of actually what is happening, and effective ways of engaging those issues. So in anthropological terms, we call those, emic perspective, or the insider's view. And I've already talked about, it helps to identify, priority problems for the communities, even though it might not be the focus of that particular research at that time, but then it's quite useful. So one could be doing, for example, research on education, but then the community, through the images that are captured or the pictures, the community clearly saying, okay, perhaps water and sanitation is an issue here, or perhaps security is an issue. So really helpful in that manner. And I've already said, so they use their Photovoices, or Photovoice is used in combination with other methodology. So really to complement the limitations of these other traditional methods of data collection, for example, interviews and group discussions, and really to reduce the intrusion of an outsider or a stranger effect. It's very useful to capture information that is difficult to capture through conversation. So there are certain things that happen or are there that they're very, it's not easy to capture them in the context of an interview or a group discussion. It addresses these other barriers that are related or associated with data collection broadly. So language barriers, illiteracy, because one is just, is able to capture what is happening there. But at the stage of presenting these findings or dissemination, it's also quite a useful method because the images can be quite impactful. So either to the community members themselves, when they reflect on these problems in their communities, which at times perhaps they didn't see them in that manner, but also to policymakers. So they are better than words, or they complement well the words that we will use in these kind of presentations. So historically, the method has been used on, with different population. So there is, in the literature, there is work describing the use of this method amongst homeless women. Women experience violence, young people in the streets, including children. And as I've already said now, it's used in combination with these other methods, really to facilitate a dialogue and a reflection of what is happening. But also they're quite useful in community engagement, especially when people are doing what we call photo exhibition, where they display the photos to the communities, and the communities are able to come in and have this conversation of what has been found, and then what it means, and so on and so forth. And also, it's quite interesting, I think, for the researchers themselves to see that the images are when they're presented, people can be quite engaged with them. There are several challenges. Some challenges that are associated with the method, and there are safety concerns, especially for those who will misunderstand the purpose of the whole exercise, either of research broadly or the data collection through the Photovoice methodology. Issues of theft of cameras, which could lead into, for example, data loss and so on. But also there are ethical concerns. So some people question whether it's appropriate to use, community members, people who are unprofessional researchers, to do the data collection. But also obtaining consent can be quite challenging when you're using photo voices. So before you take a picture, do you ask for consent, or do you just take a picture and then ask for consent later? And what does it mean? So in the end, that has led to an adaptation of different ways that the method is used. So capturing real-time events, of course, some which perhaps don't involve people, but also using role model actors, community actors, so people who would role play certain roles, and then they get the community members take photos. So these would be okay. This is the context. These are the pictures about what is happening, and then people would role play, because as a way of dealing with some of these issues around obtaining consent, especially if it's expected to be done prior, and issues of exposing the data collectors and community members, so people who will be captured in those images, exposing them to risk. And also broadly now the use of the images, especially during the dissemination stage, and this is particular concern when the images are uploaded online in websites and so on. So they could be abused if people decide to do so. So these are some of the things which are important, which we considered them when we were designing our studies and the use of this method. So I think it's also important for other colleagues who are considering using this method to reflect on this. So I'm now going to talk about the study, the first study, alcohol use among youth in Tanzania. So this study, we conducted it in 2 regions in Tanzania, and we used a different set of methods. So there was GIS, there's mapping, and Photovoice was just one of the methods that we used, and we used it in combination with group discussion. So for this particular study, so in this study we did it in 2 regions in Tanzania. So Mwanza region on the southern shores of Lake Victoria, and in Kilimanjaro region in the northern part of the country. It involved youth aged 18 to 24 years who were purposefully sampled The young people were working in the informal sector. So for the females, it was either working as food vendors or tailors. And for the males, it was working in either the car garages or as carpenters or welders. And we recruited these young people from their working sites. So we involved the local leadership, and then the owners of these either these garages or carpentry workshops. They talked about the study, provided them information, and then the young people also were given information about the study, and those who consented or agreed, then they were invited to take part in the group discussions. And they were taken through a series of group discussions. So it was 6 group discussions each group. In each region, we had 2 groups, so 1 for males and 1 for females. In total, we had 12 males in Mwanza and 8 women who participated in the workshops, the group discussion workshops, and 8 men and 5 women in Kilimanjaro. And so prior to commencing data collection, the research team first received training on the methodology because it was something relatively new. So the young people who would be involved in, as I said, in collecting data and even in these other methods, they received training here in Mwanza for 1 week on photography, ethics, issues of anonymity. And then thereafter, when we started the fieldwork, these young people are the ones who train. So these young researchers are the ones who train the participants and participants. So the training involved 1 day of intensive training on different things. Photography skills and techniques. So how do you conceal, the identities of your participants or the individuals in the field, and then the processes of consenting, verbal consenting, written consenting, because in our study, we were open to both. So either verbal consent was accepted, if that was fine, then if written consent was also possible, and that was obtained. And the young people, after the training, they were given cameras. So in these studies, we used actual cameras. Okay, so in the other studies, when I talk about it, you realize that we used phone cameras. So for these ones, it was actual cameras, and they were given those cameras for a week. And in the course of the week, the research team would visit them, either in their workplaces or in their homes, to see how they are going, things are going. And the support visits had 3 purposes. So one was to see whether they were experiencing any technical difficulties with the cameras. So probably, I don't know, in terms of saving the images or batteries and so on. But also it was, in a way, a gentle reminder to them about taking the photos because they have many things that they do in their life. But also it offered support, moral support to them. And then after that, before the workshop, the young people sat down with the researchers, selected the images that they would want to use in the discussion. So go through all the images. And then the selection considered different things, so including the quality of the images, but also if the images conformed to the standards for protecting the participants' identities, and also the young people at this stage they also made some captions, which again they would use in the discussion. Yes. So at the end, so after the 6 workshops, so as I said in the beginning, they were taken through a series of workshops, 6 workshops. The last workshop was basically the photo exhibition, where young people, we got to one venue within the community. They displayed their photos with their captions, and then they invited their friends, other community members, community leaders to come and see what they had taken. And they found it quite rewarding, quite interesting, because they could see now sort of the product of their work. And then it really, even at that sort of venue, at that forum, it facilitated some discussion between the community members about alcohol use and youth in the community. So it was they're quite useful forums, not only for feeding back or for dissemination, but also to really reflect, to enable the community to reflect about the problem. And then the young people were also given a certificate of recognition, which they really valued. So I'm going now to share with you some of the photos a few of the photos that were captured. So the first one was on, there's a theme on the effects of alcohol use among young people and the economic consequences. So here you can see a picture of a young person on your left side, taking a lot of, alcohol, and then highlighting how this leads to, them using a lot of their hard-earned income. And then on the right side, you can see those are actually alcohol sachets, so alcohol packaged in this small plastic packaging, and then on top, again, the issue of money, the Tanzanian currency. So in this one, you can see they demonstrate environmental consequences of alcohol use. So the way beer bottles are discarded in the community, posing even safety issues, for example, for children, and also environmental issues. Yeah, in this one, again, it shows or it demonstrates, exposure now of alcohol even to children. Yeah, so, and then you can see here, this is a good example of how, these young people were able to really conceal the faces of these young people, of the children, but then showing a message and really conforming to the standards for taking photos. And also they captured a lot of images on alcohol adverts, because one of the things that we were investigating was alcohol advertisement in the community and in the social spaces of these young people. So either as they go from home to work or in other places that they hang out. And really we had a wide range of images showing this. And, in the discussions, we asked them to reflect on what messages they were getting from these adverts and so on. And this was quite a useful way of facilitating the discussions. Yeah, so now I'm going to talk about the second study, which is the Maisha trial. And this study looks or explores intimate partner violence in Mwanza city. So this is just in one part of Tanzania, that is Mwanza city, where we are based. And really the aims of the study, it's a trial, but within that we have a social science component, which aims to explore the structural, socio-cultural, individual factors associated with IPV, and then also exploring how the intervention impacts the lives of the participants and their families, so the pathways for change or not for change, and then the risk factors that contribute to women's vulnerability. Yeah, and then in this study again we are using this. We have these other methods that we are using, and we are doing photo voices with women. And for this for this study we are using photo voices now in combination with interviews. So in the first study that I talked about, we are using photo voices in combination with group discussion. And here we selected a small sample of women, 9 women, as purposely selected, 5 from the intervention arm, 5 from the control. And they also underwent training, 2 days training, which involved theoretical lectures and discussions, and also practical assignments, so going out, taking pictures, getting consent from people in the street. Yeah, so it's a picture again of you can see that it's a picture of the women who participated in the training, holding the phone cameras, So they were also trained on, basic photography skills, photo techniques, and consenting. The women, after the training, they were also given a camera for a week. So they given a camera for 1 week, went back with it home. They phone camera now, so it's just phone cameras in this context. And then they also received support visits. And then at the end, the researchers visited them at their home, reviewed the pictures, and selected the ones that they wanted to use for the interviews. Yeah. So here again, we share some of the images or the pictures that were captured by the women. So here in this photo, you see it's a photo depicting a healthy relationship. So for this woman in particular, this was a representation of a healthy relationship where the partner is helping the woman to wash clothes. Also, we had other themes, so daily activities of women. We wanted them to capture about the activities of women in their community. So domestic activities on our left, and then income generating activities. Yeah, and also we also asked them to capture issues around what affects their life and their relationships. So the theme of poverty came out, and here is a picture representing that image. So you can see there the kind of houses. So mud. This is in Mwanza city, call it Mwanza city. But then you can see some mud houses, quite condensed together. Yeah. So in this picture here, again, it's about women with responsibility. For this particular respondent, she was discussing or representing an issue about women being abandoned by the partners and having to take on the responsibility of taking care of the families themselves. Yes. So having gone through those what we did, there are several lessons that we've learned. So the first one really is to say, okay, these methods, the method is feasible to be conducted in a developed country, sort of resource-limited setting like Tanzania. It's possible to do this, to use either cameras or phone cameras. They worked well in this context. But then, as probably some of you noted, there was a difference in quality. Okay, so the alcohol and youth study, we had better quality images compared to the second study, Maisha study, because of they were using phones. And this was a compromise that we had to make. Because we had to choose, and there was a lot of discussion within our team. For example, when we were planning for the Maisha study using Photovoices, whether it was appropriate to give cameras to women. So in Mwanza, it's not normal for a woman to go around with a camera either within the household or in the community taking pictures. While for young people, that is more acceptable. So the choice really was made on those grounds, considering all those factors, and also considering now the relationship, for example, for women with their partners. So how does that impact if they had this camera and then going around and taking pictures? So one needs to consider the context. Obviously, the topic of inquiry, violence vis-a-vis alcohol use, or it could be another topic. Also, the study population really. I think one needs to have some insight in terms of what is appropriate or not appropriate in that context. The support visits were crucial. So in the beginning, when we were planning these studies, we did not actually have this planned. But so this came out when we were training the participants, especially for the Maisha trial. We realized that the women would need support, So we thought, okay, so we needed to to have a system where we go out at least once in a week, when they are going about the data collection, to just check on them and really support them. And this really proved very, very crucial. So to know, what is going on, so that one is not surprised at the end of the data collection to find probably either a camera has been lost or something happened. The camera was not working also. In our case, we didn't luckily get any cases of security threats. So, and we think this is because we engage the communities very well in terms of, involving the community leaders, the owners of for the alcohol and youth study, the owners of the businesses, but also the young people receiving the training and the support. We only had one case of camera lost in the alcohol and youth study. The photo exhibition was quite successful, as I said, and it really made the whole exercise quite, especially for the young people, quite fulfilling. They could see that they have achieved, they have this product, and then the community also could get a sense of what were you doing. So in a way, it was good in that manner, but also really enabling the community now to reflect on the problem alcohol and so some challenges. So for the Maisha study, and I should mention here that we started using this Photovoice with in the Maisha trial first. So the Maisha trial was our first experience of using, and then later we did the study on young people and alcohol. So some of the lessons that we learned from in Maisha really helped us to inform our processes. So some women took fewer pictures than expected. So some women took a lot of pictures, but then some of them fewer pictures, And we think that, and they were, when they would explain and talk, we are very busy. Understandably, they have these many other activities that they have to do. But also, we think that this could be due to some reasons associated with their partners or the broader community. So, perhaps these women were not really able to embrace and the exercise as others. So perhaps the support to visit and training is crucial in this regard. A lot of pictures that were in a way one would say not directly related to the topic. So you get a lot of pictures. So, but then the rule of the thumb for us is take as much pictures as possible. Don't worry, just take as long as the camera can accommodate it. And then don't worry about the sorting. Although we provided some sort of broad guidelines, the topics, violence or about your life, or about healthy relationships. So these were just broad guidelines, alcohol and youth. But then we said, just take pictures. And these pictures, some of them, they're quite useful in understanding the context and helping the interpretation. So as said in the introduction, as Wang and colleagues said, so really the second, in their view, the second goal was to promote this critical dialogue and facilitating discussions. The photos were quite useful. So for the Maisha study, having in the interview to discuss, it enables the women to discuss about their life, their lifestyles generally, their lives, livelihood, issues of violence, relationship, and these pictures really acted as a very good prompts for that discussion during the interview, but also for having a specific focus. Sometimes when they were discussing particular images, and for providing clear illustrations. For the alcohol and youth study, equally facilitated the group discussions, and really in that study, we were able to capture very powerful images about the effects of alcohol. So, for example, I don't know, environmental impact, advertisement, impact on children, which would otherwise be very, very difficult to capture and discuss probably within a context of a group discussion or in dissemination. Yeah, so that is the end of my presentation, Idani. So I would like to acknowledge my colleagues here in Mwanza who were involved in these studies, the youth and alcohol study, Maisha trial, and probably the site team in Tanzania, and more importantly, our study participants in Mwanza and in Kilimanjaro. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much. So to get us going with the questions, I think I'll take some that have come across on the chat forum. And there's quite a few, Jerry, of folks who wanted to hear a little bit more about how you selected or how the topics for the photos were selected. Was there input, for example, from the participants into the themes that they would be taking photos on, and how was it contextualized in the sense of were these people already involved in working on these themes, or was this at the beginning, for example, of the study? So if you could say just a little bit more about the process of identifying themes and for the photo shoots.
Yes, thanks. When we started these studies, for example, if I take an example of the alcohol youth study. So obviously you have your objective and you want to offer insights into these broad areas. But then we had these what we call the broad guidelines. So which would identify the areas. So alcohol, for example, advertisements. Okay. So and then the effects of alcohol. So and then this would be what was discussed or identified by us as researchers, prior, and then during the training, having a presentation about these, and then giving an opportunity for young people to input, and then when they went out, so they had this great, broad guidelines. So, for example, the impact, the effects of alcohol. And then when they came back, so our expectation was, for example, they would talk about economic consequences or social consequences and so on. But then they came with these very, very interesting, what we would call sub-themes that really reflected what was going on. So, and then during the discussion, again, there was a discussion about what these how themes were coming out and whether they were important or not as far as they were concerned. So because some of them, so individual one, for example, would capture the consequences in a particular manner, individual number two differently probably or similar and so on. So really facilitating that discussion and debate in some cases about what was coming out and how to interpret that. So perhaps I should say it involved both, researchers on one hand at that higher level, initial sort of setting of these broad areas, and then subsequently the engagement and the input from the participants. And that is, perhaps to add, that is one of the areas that if you read, go through the literature, is quite. There's some sort of debate. So how free should you make it? Just give a camera to someone, say go and take pictures, or should you provide some guideline and where is the line? So I think folks should just balance it out depending on the aims and the context and even their population. Yeah.
So I don't want to put you on the spot, but can you do you recall a particular example where, for example, someone came in with a picture and their description opened up a whole new line of inquiry or thinking on for you as researchers that, you know, as you said, a sub-theme that you hadn't really thought about?
Yes, so for example, the effects on alcohol in children. So for us, when we were going out, it was about alcohol in young people. Okay, and then for them, when we're looking at this, for example, you know, the impact. So for them, it was across the board, and perhaps one for us, we think, okay, it could be adults and young people, but then for them, they went even as far as children, and talking about, you know, how this loitering of these bottles and packaging, but also even consumption of alcohol in front of the children sort of really impacts or initiates them at that very age to alcohol, into the alcohol, whether as it were, and perhaps, you know, use or abuse in the later days in life. Also, things like the environmental impact. So that again was something that we hadn't thought as, you know, as really linked to alcohol and young people, but perhaps not as an important issue. But then from the discussions, seemed like an important issue, and especially of the plastic packaging, which really, at the national level here in Tanzania, really has a lot of discussion and even led to a ban recently on alcohol packaging and sachets. So it was that environmental factor that also came out, and we thought, oh, this is very interesting. Yeah, I don't know. Those are some of the examples. Yeah.
Great. So we also have a couple of questions from folks about the issue around the consent process and managing that. So, for example, Laura Dean says, I'm interested to know how you manage consent of those people shown in the photograph. So is it up to the photographer to take the consent? And did you speak at all in the community at large in terms of alerting people that this was going to be going on or not?
Yes, so the consent, as I said, we had two different forms. So we provided for verbal consent and written. So for the images that we are using now, we had a form. We had a form for providing written consent for taking photos, but then for use, you know, for dissemination purposes. So at least for in these pictures that we are showing, we have both consent for that. But then, as I said in my presentation, it was quite a challenging thing, even for researchers. So saying, so how do we you know, get consent from someone? So you need to approach them, and you need to talk about a little bit about the study, and so on. And in our practical training, we focused a little bit on that. So when they went out, the women, they would, you know, for example, they would talk about, you know, the study with the family members, and then the family members would say, fine. And then when they went out in the community, or you know, they would again verbally talk about the study with those individuals, and those who agreed, they would take photos. And then for those who they managed to get written consent, we obtained that. So really, it was relying on we had these tools. We trained the people who were taking the photos, but then for them at that stage, when they were in the field, it was up to them to get the consent from the individual and so on. We had, of course, introduced the study to the wider community, to the village, to the street leaders, and so on. So that was our experience, and yeah.
Okay, great. So I'm going to open it up now. and see if there's anyone who would like to unmute themselves, *7, and ask a question directly to Dr. Mashana. This is Erin Stern calling from Rwanda, and she was interested. She noted on your slide that you interviewed, or that you had both women from the intervention community in Maisha and in the comparison community, and she wondered whether or not you encouraged them to take pictures of anything differently. So, for example, did you encourage people who were involved in the intervention to kind of document the intervention in their lives, or were they all given sort of the same themes to look at?
Yes, thanks, Erin, for that question. So for the photos I've shared, so the data that we currently have was for the baseline. So before we started the intervention, so at that time it was quite a similar guideline, I should say. So just understanding about broadly their lives and issues about relationships and so on. And then we are planning to, after for those women in the intervention arm, we are interviewing them actually at 3 points. So midway after they just finished the intervention, we interview them, and then a year or two after the intervention to assess the impact. So the guideline at that time, we were about just to start the impact assessment, and we'll involve things about broader themes about whether the intervention has changed anything. But also it will enable us to really compare, what they took at the beginning and now, and see whether the pictures they're taking now are more focused or not. So those the images I shared were taken at the baseline, and it was pretty much similar guideline. But then when you follow up, especially if you're doing a longitudinal type follow up, then perhaps you would be modifying accordingly, depending on the things that you want to capture at those different points. I don't know whether I've answered.
Do we have another question from the community here? So I have one that we can do as people think about other issues they might want to bring up. I was wondering if you could say a bit about how you debriefed, how you actually worked with people and their photos, because presumably a lot of the data that you're getting as a research process comes from hearing people's reflections on their own photos. So if you could say a bit about how you did that, and also how you captured that. Did you actually take notes on it? Did you record it? Do you have any recommendations for how people can capture that reflection for the use as data in an ongoing process of evaluation?
Yes. So in our case for the two studies. So for the interviews with women, so researchers would take notes. So when they're selecting when they're selecting or going through those photos, at the selection stage, before either using them in the interview or in the group discussion. So that forms part of the data in addition to the images, and really helps you to document the process on how the data was captured and the filtering at those different stages. And then during the discussions themselves or the interviews, we voiced recorded. So we had these recorders during the interviews, which would capture the interview, the conversation between the respondent and and the researcher. And in the group discussions, again, we recorded, but also in addition, the researchers would take notes. So again, those would form part of the data in terms of exploring the topics, but also the illustration, the photo illustrations that the participants presented and were talking about. And then subsequently these were transcribed and used as data that would inform the interpretation at the different stages. So
right.
I think the documentation is quite important in order to, because the photos, as I said, sometimes you get some participants would take more, some less, and then some would focus, and then you want really to be able to demonstrate when you are doing your analysis whether this was across the board or it just came from a few participants. For example, people will be asking those questions and so on. So that is the way we handled it in our case. Yeah.
One other thing that okay, go ahead. Was someone trying to ask a question? Okay, so one other thing that I think would be interesting to comment on is you mentioned that the use of the sachets, the little plastic sachets used for containing alcohol was banned in Tanzania. Were you able to use any of the data from this study, either the photos or testimony from the young people? Were you able to introduce that in any way into that discussion as part of your research uptake activities?
Yeah, so for the alcohol in use study, during the photo exhibition at the community level, so during the exhibition, there was a discussion, some discussion which included these issues around the use of sachet, because from our previous work, so this is just one of our work. We've done several research studies looking at broadly the subject of alcohol consumption amongst young people. So we know that was an issue. But then in this research, and particularly the use of the Photovoice was enabled us to capture, to have these images. Now we are planning. We've not done the dissemination at the national level, but our plan for this alcohol and use study was to involve one or two researchers, young researchers actually, who took part, or the community members who took some of the photos, to come to this policy type of stakeholders meeting and really talk about these images. So far we've only used them as researchers in different forums within the country, but then we think that in subsequent meetings we'll involve young people. And when we were wrapping up the data collection, that is one of the questions that really the young people were asking. So is this it? So what next? So and we thought really that opened quite an important aspect of saying, oh, so how do we also involve or engage these young people in these later stages of at least dissemination, not beyond their community. So we think we are going to involve them in that manner. So, and it highlights really the importance of engaging the communities, in this case young people, in all stages. So it's not only the data collection, but also subsequently perhaps the dissemination. So we think, that will be quite crucial. Although, as you said, Laurie, that Tanzania banned the use of alcohol sachets in March, there has been some sort of pushback from the industry, and we are now seeing some signs of other forms of packaging coming up. So still very small, but sort of plastic containers. So we think the young people are quite crucial in sort of continuing to engage.
Great. Well, I really want to thank you for your time and for these great stories, and we look forward to seeing you all in the next Strive Learning Lab. Take care.